have no intention of further reopening or opening this issue.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper says he doesn't want to reopen the same-sex marriage debate, but is it too late? New court documents sparked a frenzy after a federal lawyer argued that in order for a marriage to be valid under Canadian law, it must also be valid in the place where the same-sex partners live. Now, this legal interpretation came up in a same-sex divorce case where the law says you can't file for divorce in Canada unless you lived here for a year. Now the government is scrambling. Have they nullified thousands of marriages? The Justice Minister, Rob Nicholson, just minutes ago really, said that they are now looking to clarify laws around dissolving a marriage. But is it too late? Is the same-sex marriage debate already reopened? When will the laws be clarified? Let's get some clarification. In Vancouver, I'm joined by the Parliamentary Secretary to the Justice Minister, Lynne Findlay. In Toronto, the NDP MP Olivia Chow is here, and with me in studio, Liberal MP Hedy Fry. Lynne Findlay, let me start with you. Has the government says it hasn't reopened the same-sex marriage debate, but many people, and we've talked to a lot of them today, suddenly woke up and they said, has my marriage been dissolved? As the federal court lawyer said, in this case, and I'll just so our audience knows, neither party had the legal capacity to marry a person of the same sex under the laws of their respective domicile, in that case, Florida and the United Kingdom. As a result, their marriage is not legally valid under Canadian law. Are same-sex couple marriages valid right now?
Well, obviously, it's always the way it seems that a particular case causes some confusion, and that's what's happened here. Under our international laws governing divorce and marriage, a marriage that takes place in Canada, a jurisdiction that recognizes same-sex marriage, is still governed when it comes to dissolution under the jurisdictions those people live in. As I understand this particular case, one person's from Florida, one's from the United Kingdom. And we also have residency requirements here in Canada. That's true whether it's a same-sex marriage or not. Under our Divorce Act, in order to get a divorce in Canada, you have to have lived here for 10 of the last 12 months. So that requirement has to be met by anyone. What the minister is now saying, and because this has come to light, and I understand there's only one jurisdiction, I think it may be California, where they've actually statutorily done something to go around this international obligation. But this is what we're looking at here now. The minister is looking at options to change the policy, not the Divorce Act.
Okay, so let me just get this straight, and I'll read you Mr. Nicholson's quote in a minute. But right now, as we speak, for thousands of people who have come since 2005 to Canada to have same-sex marriages, are their marriages invalid right now?
No. For instance, if a couple, even if they lived outside of Canada, had a same-sex marriage here, and returned to Canada and met our residency requirements, they would be able to dissolve their marriage.
What if they came here, got married, and then just went back? Let's say, and we have Dan Savage standing by. He came to Canada, he got married, and returned home to the United States. Is his marriage invalid?
Yes, that is the issue. If it's a matter of dissolving that marriage, he could not presently do that in Canada, so and that's where we're looking at policy options.
Okay, let me bring in Olivia Chow. So he couldn't dissolve it because it's not legally valid. Olivia Chow, what do you make of this? Is this the reopening of the same-sex marriage debate?
Evan, what a mess. Either the Harper Conservatives government is incompetent, or what Mr. Harper is doing is saying one thing publicly: oh, we're not opening the case, we're not opening the law, we support same-sex marriage. However, privately, in court, they're instructing the lawyer to say something completely opposite, completely contrary, which is that your marriage is no longer legal. Now, over 5,000 people came to Canada, paid good money to get here, and they make their vows in front of their loved ones, in front of their families and their friends. And after all of that, they are now told, wait a second, your marriage is no longer legal because your jurisdiction do not recognize same-sex marriage. They came to Canada to get married because we support gay marriage under the law, and their jurisdiction did not, and that's why they came to Canada to get married, and most of them are from the United States. That's really deceiving them, and that's not fair.
Hedy Fry, what do you think is behind this? The federal court lawyer basically says maybe it's because of residency requirements, but a lot of people came here and they had no idea that their marriage could be invalid. What do you think is at stake here?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, the question is what does the government mean? They confuse the issue. While the Prime Minister says, no, we don't intend to open the same-sex debate, the point is that this government, it's not the first time they have said one thing and then spent millions of dollars in court doing the exact opposite. The point is, when those people came here to get married, they were given a legal document that said they were married. No one at that time said, oh, by the way, guys, you got to live here for 11 years. So this is, in the first instance, we set them up. I mean, you have to ask if we set them up. The secondly is Kerri Lynne says that this is so all across Canada. Ontario does not have such requirements about residency for divorce or for marriage. So what are we talking about here? Is people who get married in one jurisdiction? Not? The government should have sat down and talked to the provinces before they got here. They should not have made the money and allowed people for the last 6 years to come here believing that they were getting a legal marriage document when they came here, and now telling them it's not so.
Now, Carolyn, Findlay, let me ask you this. The Minister of Justice minutes ago sent out this, and I'll read it to our viewers. I want to be clear. The government has no intention of reopening the debate on the definition of marriage. This case today involved the fact that under current law, some marriages performed in Canada could not be dissolved in Canada. I will be looking at options to clarify the law so that marriages performed in Canada can be undone in Canada. Okay, so let me ask you something. Is the federal court justice, who we originally quoted, is now the minister basically saying that person has it wrong and we're going to change the laws? Are you backtracking on this?
It's not a backtracking. I'm trying to, and I have to say some of the comments from my colleagues are ridiculous. We have been very clear, and the Prime Minister has been very clear, we're not opening up any debate on the definition of marriage. We do recognize same-sex marriages in Canada. It is not correct that Ontario is different than the rest of Canada.
So I hate to interrupt. I want to
national.
clarify. Just when you say you're not reopening the definition of same-sex, what do you tell a same-sex couple? And we've got one standing by, Dan Savage, who's got his marriage certificate, and now he wakes up to find out it's no longer valid. Doesn't that, for him, reopen up the same-sex marriage debate when he suddenly discovers it's not actually valid when he thought it was 7 years later?
But that is not a correct characterization. If, for instance, that person were to meet our residency requirements in Canada, like any other married couple has to do to dissolve the marriage, that it would be it's a legal marriage here. It would be recognized here, and the dissolution would be recognized here. What we're running into is an international conflict of law, where in international law, if a marriage is performed in a jurisdiction that recognizes it, but the couple do not meet the same jurisdictional standards in their jurisdiction, it's not recognized, then there is a conflict. So the minister is saying, now that we recognize that conflict, we are going to move
we understand what Carolyn is saying. That's not the point.
Just hang on a second.
Let's get Hedy Fry, then Olivia Chow.
The point is this. The point is that no one said to anyone when they came here, making tons of money, tourism dollars, etc., that what they were being sold was a pig in a poke. That in fact they had to meet certain requirements. Carolyn, I did not interrupt you, so I'd like to finish. The bottom line is simply this, that you told people it was okay. People left here believing they had a legal document. Now they're being told that there was a requirement for residency. The point is no one told them that, and Carolyn is wrong. Ontario has no requirement for residency, either for marriage or divorce.
Olivia Chow wants to get in.
Well, let me just be very clear. In October, in the House of Commons during question period, the New Democrats asked the question to the Justice Minister. We warned him, this is going to happen. We said, if you intervene or if you're being sued right now, and you have to be very clear where you stand. At that time, he gave a completely muddled answer, basically saying, oh, we don't want to reopen the law, but we'll see what happens. And I'm glad he actually, in his statements you read out a few minutes ago, that he will clarify. If he believes, if Canada say that marriage is legal in Canada for gay and lesbian, then it doesn't matter you're a Canadian or non-Canadian. There's no residency requirement for Ontario. There's no residency requirement. And on top of that, there is if you divorce, under the Divorce Act, which is a federal act, not Ontario, that you do have to be living in Canada for 1 year for the Divorce Act.
Okay, sorry, just in the spirit of time, Kerri Findlay, just a last word to you in the last 20 seconds.
Ms. Findlay's confused.
Can you tell us, the minister now said you'll work on changing these laws.
Why didn't you do it earlier?
When will we see that?
We're moving on it right away. The minister is looking at it now because we do want to give same-sex couples who are married in Canada the assurance that they could get and can get a dissolution of their marriage here. That does not deal necessarily with all aspects of divorce, but certainly they would be able to dissolve their marriage here. So we're looking at
would
that
they
now.
be valid? Would they be valid marriages then?
Yes.
Okay.
The minister had the option. I'm sorry, Evan. If the minister had the option to do this for the last few months when he was planning his case and what his lawyers were going to say, he could have called the provinces. He could have started that process of getting this clear, and he didn't. So this is this kind of thing that gets the confusion going.
The international law has not changed, and it was the same under the Liberal government.
It has nothing to do with international law.
Findlay, Olivia Chow,
nothing to do with international law.
This is a debate that affects thousands of people, and it's I appreciate your time and your perspectives on this today. Our question of the day is this, and we're asking our viewers, because there's a lot of debate about this. These are our political watchdogs. We'll weigh in on, do you believe the federal government is trying to reopen the debate on same-sex marriage or not? There's two views on this clearly. Vote and contact us at cbc.ca/politics, politics@cbc.ca. On Twitter, I'm at Evan Solomon CBC. Love to hear from you on that. Now, coming up, we'll talk about someone who's feeling this very personally. He just found out his Canadian marriage might not hold up in a court of law. How is Dan Savage feeling? He's a U.S. columnist. He's been an activist. He opens up after the break about his reaction to the fact that, well, he may not be married anymore. Stay with us. We are talking about this same-sex marriage debate as the government reopened that debate. Well, someone who feels this very personally is the U.S. columnist Dan Savage. He's now, well, he thinks, happily married to his same-sex partner. Now lawyers for the Canadian government are throwing that in doubt, apparently, because they're questioning the validity of marriages like Dan Savage's, marriages between non-Canadian same-sex couples who came here to tie the knot. Where does the government's legal action leave someone like Dan Savage and thousands of others like him who came since 2005 to Canada to get married? Has Canada gone from the paragon to pariah in the same-sex community? Dan Savage, welcome back to Power and Politics.
Thanks for having me back.
You were married in Canada back in 2005. What was your reaction today when you found out that a federal court said the marriages granted in Canada were no longer valid?
I was on my way from my bedroom to my bathroom, and I grabbed my cell phone and looked at my Twitter feed and turned right around and went back and told my husband that I'd just gotten out of bed. I turned around and told him that, guess what? He was no longer my husband. He was my boyfriend.
The federal
that we had been divorced by Canada.
Here's what the federal, there's a specific case they're referring to here, and the federal court lawyer says this. In this case, the case that they're working on, neither party had the legal capacity to marry a person of the same sex under the laws in their respective domicile, in this case, Florida and the United Kingdom. As a result, their marriage is not legally valid under Canadian law. That invalidates your marriage as well, Dan Savage. So what do you think's going on here?
I think the Harper government is finally making a run at not just the rights of gays and lesbians who are not Canadians, but the rights of gays and lesbians who are Canadians as well. They're chipping away they're eroding these rights, this right to wed that was hard won, hard fought, and that the Harper government has said for years was a settled issue and one that they weren't going to attack or undermine. And here they are, finally, taking a shot at it, taking a shot at us. And we take it very personally. And these have real consequences for same-sex couples who are married and married in Canada, not just Canadian same-sex couples. My Canadian marriage is recognized by the state of Washington. The state of Washington grants us all the rights and privileges of marriage as domestic partners under the law here in Washington because we are legally married in Canada. If we are not legally married in Canada, if our marriage is not valid, we have lost those rights here in Washington state.
And what are the consequences of that?
The consequences are I could be turned away from my partner's bedside during a medical emergency. The consequences could touch us when it comes to inheritance. They're potentially very serious negative consequences. And division of property, if we should wind up divorcing, which I don't think we will, all sorts of things, hundreds and hundreds of rights that are conferred by the state were stripped from us this morning by Stephen Harper's government.
You're the father of a son as well. What does that do to, are there implications on your family?
Well, there are legal implications. There are also just personal matters. When we spend a great deal of time in Canada, my son's a snowboarder. Every year we go up to Banff for a few weeks. And when we pass through customs, when we go through passport control in Canada, they ask us what our relationship is. And we've been able to say since 2005, this is my husband, this is our son. And that means something to our son. When we come back into the United States and we're asked the same question, we have to say, this is my boyfriend, this is our adopted son. And that means something to him, too.
You have a marriage...
to have that taken away from him is potentially very damaging.
You have a marriage certificate. On the marriage certificate, was there any indication that you thought this was perhaps not a permanent document, a permanent situation?
None whatsoever. There's actually one caveat here on this marriage certificate. This certificate is invalid if plasticized or altered. There's nothing on here about... Be sure to check in with Stephen Harper's government every once in a while to make sure they haven't changed their minds.
Stephen Harper says he has no intention of further reopening this issue. I'm quoting him today when asked about this.
Too late. The issue is reopened. You can't invite people to come to Canada. As Canada's Tourism Bureau has done, invite same-sex couples from other nations and states to visit Canada and to avail themselves of this right to wed in Canada and then retroactively declare their marriages invalid. If Canada can do that to gays and lesbians from the United States who've married, perhaps Canada, perhaps Stephen Harper's government can do that to gays and lesbians in Canada who've also married. This is arbitrary and this is unfair, and it is reopening the issue. I know that Stephen Harper would like to be able just to get away with this, but you can't strip people of their right to wed. You can't invalidate legally entered into marriages with the filing of a legal brief and then say, oh, but now we don't want to talk about it anymore. We're not reopening this issue. We're just retroactively declaring your marriage null and void. So, I'm sorry, but that is reopening the issue.
So what are you going to do about this? What's your response to this now?
I'm not sure where we go from here. I'm not sure what can happen. I know there will be lawsuits. There are Canadian citizens who are married to residents of the U.S. citizens who reside in the United States. Are their marriages invalid because they don't reside in Canada? This is going to be back before the courts.
Do you feel...
We're not going to take this lying down. People have this idea, opponents of LGBT equality have this idea that if they can just win one, if they can just overturn Prop 8 in California, if they can just invalidate the marriages of same-sex couples in Canada that have been legally entered into, that we're just going to give up and walk away and go, oh, I guess it's over. I guess we should all march back into the closet and marry women. I should go marry someone like perhaps Michelle Bachmann. And we're just going to give up on our equality. And that's not true. We're going to keep at it. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to make discriminating against us much more painful and protracted and complicated than tolerating our full civil equality.
So you use the word discriminating. You think that this is an act of discrimination against gays and lesbians?
Absolutely. There are people who live in Canada whose marriages are invalid in their home countries, who are opposite sex, who are heterosexuals. If a Jewish man is married to a woman who has Saudi Arabian citizenship and resides in Canada, that marriage is illegal in Saudi Arabia. Is their marriage invalid? Or is this retroactive invalidation of a legal marriage a special right that only gays and lesbians are entitled to in Canada? Or does it apply equally to all? There are nations where it is illegal for people to marry people of different races. Are those marriages invalid in Canada?
Dan Savage,
I don't think so.
We've just got now a clarification. It's just coming in from the Justice Minister, Nicholson. He's saying this now. There's new developments here, so I'll read it to you. I don't think you've heard this yet. I want to be very clear. The government, he writes, has no intention of reopening the debate on the definition of marriage. This case today involved the fact that under current law, some marriages performed in Canada could not be nullified or dissolved in Canada. I will be looking at options to clarify that law so that marriages performed in Canada can be undone in Canada. So is that a shift in position now?
That's absolutely a shift in position. Reread what you read at the top of the interview, where they declared all same-sex marriages of foreign nationals in Canada to not be valid in Canada. This is a walking back already. I think the Harper government is realizing that they really stepped in it. They really angered a lot of people, not just same-sex couples from other countries who've come to Canada to marry, but gays and lesbians and our allies in Canada as well, and fair-minded Canadians of all sexual orientations who do not want to see this divisive social issue ripped back open. I welcome this development. I welcome this walking it back. I want to see the Harper government eat this, and it seems as if they're taking the first bite.